On today's show, the Milwaukee Bucks deciding to fire their longtime head coach Mike Budenholzer after a disappointing first-round exit. Why was it time for the Bucks to move on from Budenholzer? How does this impact Giannis' future in Milwaukee? And what should the Bucks be looking for in their next head coach? All of that and more coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Jimmy Butler to score more than 26.5 points? What about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? Or how about Kevin Durant to have less than 6.5 assists? Or what about Steph Curry to have more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. They've got you covered for everything over at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. They're safe. They offer fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. And right now, every day of the NBA playoffs, one Prize Picks user will win a chance at becoming a millionaire. But you have to download the app to find out how. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Bucks, Kane Pitman, who you can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Bucks. And Kane, after leading the Milwaukee Bucks to the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, but then a disappointing first-round exit against the Miami Heat, losing 4 games to 1. The Bucks firing their championship coach, Mike Budenholzer. Let's start with, first off, was this the right move? Was this the right move? And if so, if it was the right move, why was it time to move on from Mike Budenholzer?
Well, it's impossible to say right now whether it is the right move for the Bucks. I think we'll be able to determine that over the next season or two. But I think it's a totally understandable move. I've always been a big Mike Budenholzer guy because I don't actually think that his absolute strengths as a coach can be easily viewed from sitting on your couch as a fan. I think he's been heavily criticized unfairly for years. If you look across his record as a coach, this guy's a very good coach. He's an elite program builder. He's able to get a locker room that can play together, and there's no drama. There's been zero drama in his time in Milwaukee. And then additionally, on top of that, he took this franchise that did nothing for all these years and has been a contender every single year. He might not be the best game manager in the NBA, but I still think if you ask me to rank where Mike Budenholzer sits among the coaches in the NBA, I think he'd be somewhere between 4 and 8. That's pretty damn good. So when you move on from a guy like that, there is some serious risk that is attached to the next move and what type of coach you bring in. But at the same time, in the 5 years, they had the number 1 record in the NBA 3 out of those 5 years. And in those 3 years, they failed to reach the NBA Finals. At some point, something has to give. So I understand why they moved on.
You mentioned some of the unfair criticisms. I mean, do you have some examples of these as to just some of the gripes that maybe Bucks fans or just, fans in general have had with Budenholzer and maybe some of the pushback that you have for those?
Well, I always find it difficult to judge a coach because I don't think that it is the easiest. We can look at players and say, okay, well, they missed shots.
Yeah.
Please hit shots in the future. That's how we can judge players and turnovers, different types of things. But I think coaching is very difficult to sit on your couch or be in the arena and actually understand all the nuances that go into leading an NBA team. So the one thing we always heard with Mike Budenholzer is he doesn't make adjustments. And I say, okay, well, what adjustments are you talking about? And then they'll go through, and it's a conversation that never really goes anywhere. If you look at Mike Budenholzer and what he was able to do with his team, elite defense year in, year out. And the thing that I always found with Bud is if the Bucks are playing well, they're doing that despite Mike Budenholzer as a coach. And if they're not doing well, it's only because Bud doesn't make adjustments. So this is the narrative that continues to go on. So again, I'm not saying that Mike Budenholzer is a historic elite head coach, but I don't think that he was ever from a section of fans and media, I don't think he was treated fairly, because I think that the numbers would suggest, and if you watch this team over a period of time, he was able to maximize what realistically is a limited roster in Milwaukee. You've got, in my opinion, the best player in the world, and you've got a bunch of role players that are supposed to fit around him. I think there was limitations with what this team could do. They were absolutely a championship contender. But the other thing is, we also know this. There's a fair bit of luck that is attached with winning a title, and sometimes it doesn't go your way. And for the Bucks, they had some events that went on over the last 5 years that you would look back and go, that is bad luck.
Yeah, only one team out of 30 can win the title every year, right? There's if you look at it through that lens, right? There's 29 losers every single season. So you've got to be able to maybe quantify it a little bit and say, well, there was a lot of success during the Budenholzer era. You mentioned his name there. Well, you didn't mention him by name. Mentioned the possible best player in the world there a second ago. But how does this impact Giannis, right? How does it impact his future? And what do the Bucks have to do to, I guess, keep Giannis happy long-term in Milwaukee?
Yeah, there hasn't really been any indications that he's not happy or he will be unhappy in the years to come. He's got another 2 years on his contract plus a player option, so it's not absolute panic stations right now. But I do think that when you look at the change with head coach, I don't think the timing should be completely dismissed. The Bucks understand that if they come back with the exact same group and the same thing happens next year, maybe there is increased pressure on the franchise. So I would imagine, and Bucks GM John Horst said that the players weren't involved in the coaching decision. I'm not sure. You can believe that if you want. I have to believe that Giannis was at least consulted if they're going to make a move like this for the franchise. So I would imagine any coaching hire, the first question you ask the coach is, hey, what do you want to do with Giannis? How do you think is the best way to use him? What do you think are the best players around him? Because let's face it, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, everything you're doing right now has to revolve around how you maximize Giannis and hopefully get another title for the franchise.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it there a moment ago. I mean, is this Bucks team in a position where they can confidently just, re-sign their free agents and run it back, obviously with a new coach in tow? Would there be a lot of confidence doing that, or is this a team that has to really do some internal evaluation and think, hey, we might need some sweeping changes to really kind of revamp this roster?
There's just not a lot of flexibility, and that's the difficult position they find themselves in. Chris Middleton has a player option, so do they extend him for multiple years? You hope that he doesn't just walk away, because as a lot of the listeners will know, it's not like if Chris Middleton leaves, the Bucks are already over the salary cap. They've been in a luxury tax. It's not like you just have free money to spend on a player. So getting a replacement for Chris Middleton would be impossible. The other big decision they have to make is Brook Lopez is going to be an unrestricted free agent. In my opinion, almost a career best year when you consider what he did on both ends of the floor this year. Yes, he's 35, but I would have to imagine he's a player that you got to bring back. So what are you trading? They don't have any draft picks because they traded them all for the Drew Holiday trade a few years ago, which, by the way, they won a title, so it's still an excellent trade. But I don't know what the flexibility is in terms of what they can actually recoup back in trade. So I don't think that there is a major overhaul for this roster coming. But I also think, even though they are aging, if you have Giannis, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez as your top four players, there's no reason to come into the season and think that this team isn't going to be a top 3-4 seed in the East again and give themselves a chance in the postseason.
Are there any kind of early or preliminary names on the horizon that could be, considered for the Bucks, open head coaching position? And if so, I mean, what do you think needs to be maybe the number one quality in the next head coach that they bring in, especially because, you're walking into a position with some pretty big shoes to fill, a guy that you just proclaimed as one of the, somewhere in the 4 to 8 range of coaches in the NBA. I mean, what qualities need to be, brought in by the next guy?
I think that's a pretty good point to make from the start. If you look at around the league and you say, okay, well, who would want this job? Probably everyone, because you get a chance to coach Giannis. But at the same time, I don't think it's easy, because when Mike Budenholzer walked in the door 5 years ago, the Bucks had done nothing. There was, hopefully the Bucks can become a contender. Now, if you take this role, the bar is literally winning a title. And if you don't win a title, then people are going to say that, well, you didn't quite reach the expectations that you would want with a player like Giannis in his prime. So there is a lot of pressure on this role. Same names that you probably went through with the Houston Rockets, Jackson. So Nick Nurse is there. Frank Vogel is there.
Yeah, the real question is Ime Udoka kicking himself for not waiting a little bit longer to see, the Milwaukee job open up?
It is the one thing I see a lot with Bucks fans on our show commenting that, they wish that Udoka was still there and still an option, and asking, can he actually get out of that? It's funny because Udoka is one of those names, and Quinn Snyder's another one who took the job in Atlanta that I think Bucks fans had some interest in. But Kenny Atkinson is another name that is coming up a lot. Charles Lee, who's been the lead assistant under Mike Budenholzer this year, or the last couple of seasons when Darvin Ham moved on to the Lakers. So there's a number of names there. The one thing I would say is I would find it highly, highly surprising if the Bucks went down the path of an unproven or untried head coach. I don't think that's the type of move they'll be making with where this roster is at, because I don't think that there is much room to take a risk.
Who will be the next head coach in Milwaukee? How will this impact Giannis's future? You'll have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Bucks. Kane, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks for having me.